The sun burned white in a washed-out sky, pitiless and unblinking. It stared down at a sea of dust and sage that rolled endlessly toward mountains so far away they looked more like faded recollections than real land. The stagecoach rocked and complained, its wheels grinding against ruts and stone, as if the earth itself resisted passage through this forsaken stretch of territory. Inside, Elva Rook pressed a lace handkerchief to her mouth, fighting the alkali dust that clawed at her throat with every jolt. 3 weeks on the road had stripped the softness from her body and her expectations alike, carrying her far from the shaded streets of Pennsylvania and into a country that felt hostile by design. The other passengers were long gone. A preacher bound west for California. A merchant's wife dropped in Denver. 2 silver-hungry miners who vanished into the camps without a backward glance. Now Elva rode alone, save for the driver perched high above and the silent shotgun rider beside him, a man who hadn't spoken in 2 days. Her fingers slipped into the pocket of her traveling dress, finding the folded letter she'd touched 100 times already. Its edges were worn thin, creased soft by hope and fear alike. The advertisement had felt like salvation when she first read it in a Philadelphia paper. Respectable rancher seeks bride. Stable home guaranteed. Protestant preferred. Inquiries to Thorne Harker, Willow Creek Ranch, Arizona Territory. She drew out the small daguerreotype she carried. Not her own likeness, but that of the man she believed awaited her. Thorne Harker looked stern in the image, perhaps 40, clean-shaven, his eyes unreadable. His letter had been spare and proper. He promised a home, respect, and a shared future carved from this raw land. The memory of her aunt's parlor felt unreal now. The coal smoke, carriage wheels on cobblestone, silk skirts whispering past polished furniture. That life had been swallowed whole by distance and necessity. After her father Harlan Rook died, debt devoured what little remained. Her brother Brevin had seen to placing Selah into service. There had been nothing left for Elva. At 23, with no dowry and no prospects, the advertisement had offered the only honorable escape from becoming another mouth her relatives could not afford to feed. The stagecoach shuddered to an abrupt stop, throwing her forward so sharply she nearly pitched through the leather window flap. Outside, she saw a structure that barely deserved to be called a station. 2 sagging buildings of adobe and wood, a corral with a handful of rib-thin horses, and a well with a broken windlass leaning like a snapped bone. "Willow Creek Station," the driver called down, his voice cracked and dry. "End of the line for you, miss." Elva's heart slammed against her corset. "But Mr. Harker was to meet me at the ranch." The driver climbed down, boots stirring small storms of dust. He was all tendon and sunburn, his eyes sliding away from hers. "This here's as far as I go. Ranch is that way." He waved vaguely toward the shimmering horizon. 10 miles, maybe 15. "Someone will come?" Her voice lifted despite her effort to steady it. "You're leaving me here?" "Schedule to keep," he muttered, already turning back. The shotgun rider dismounted as well, and together they worked quickly, swapping horses with practiced indifference. No one met her eyes. Elva stood in the dirt as her trunk was dumped beside the station wall, her dress already filmed with grit. The building looked dead. Its door hung crooked on rusted hinges. No smoke, no sound, no sign anyone had been there in a very long time. "Please," she said, hating the tremor she couldn't hide. "You can't just leave me." The driver paused long enough to spit tobacco into the dust. "Ain't leaving you nowhere. This is Willow Creek. You asked for it." Minutes later, the stagecoach rolled away, swallowed by its own cloud of dust. The noise faded, wheels, hooves, until there was nothing but wind and the slow groan of the broken door. Elva stood motionless, afraid that if she moved, the truth of it all would settle in her bones. Then she lifted her carpet bag and stepped inside. It was worse than she imagined. Dust lay thick on every surface. Furniture was overturned. The air carried the sour stink of long-dead animals. No one had been here in months, maybe years. On a table near the window, she found a water-stained ledger, its pages warped and brittle. That was when she understood. No one was coming. And Willow Creek had never been meant to save her. Its pages were packed with neat entries that ended without warning, the ink stopping cold 2 years earlier. Outside, the sun was already sliding towards the western range, smearing the sky with copper and dark red. Elva Rook felt the truth settle in her chest with brutal clarity. No one was coming for her, not by accident, not by intention. She had been left in the wrong place, and night was closing in fast. She hauled her trunk into the station, shoved the warped door shut, and wedged it as best she could. From her carpet bag, she pulled the small revolver her brother Brevin Rook had pressed into her hand back east, OC, .32 caliber that felt too cold, too solid, like an object that did not belong to her life. Brevin had shown her how to load it in their aunt's narrow garden, neighbors whispering in shock at the sharp cracks of sound. Now, as dusk bled into darkness, she was grateful for his stubborn insistence. The desert changed its face. The killing heat drained away, replaced by a sharp, biting cold that slid through every crack in the walls. Sounds crept out of the dark, the yipping of coyotes, the shrill cry of unseen birds, movements that might have been wind, or might not. Elva wrapped herself in her traveling cloak and the thin blanket she found in her trunk, the revolver resting in her lap. Her thoughts drifted to Philadelphia, the brick row houses, gas lamps holding back the night, policemen pacing their beats. Here, darkness ruled completely. Only hard stars burned overhead, distant and indifferent. Had she crossed 3,000 miles just to die alone out here? Had Thorn Harker ever existed at all? Or was this abandonment deliberate? The hours dragged by, stretching into something endless. Sleep came in fragments. She jerked awake at every sound. Once, she was certain she heard horses, but the noise faded before she could be sure. When dawn finally thinned the dark in the east, she made her choice. She would not stay and wait for death, or rescue that might never come. She would walk in the direction the driver had pointed. She would find Willow Creek Ranch, or she would die on the way. Elva left a note on the table, though she doubted anyone would ever read it. She gathered what little she could carry, a canteen she filled from the well, a few pieces of hard tack, the revolver, and stepped out as the sun began to climb. On foot, the land revealed its true nature. Stones bruised her soles, thorny plants clawed at her skirts. Even in the early morning, the sun pressed down like a physical burden. The mountains ahead shimmered like mirages, never seeming to draw closer. By midday, her water was half gone and her strength bleeding away. Her boots, meant for city sidewalks, split at the seams. Blisters broke open, blood soaking her stockings. Still, she kept moving, following what might have been a trail, or might have been nothing more than hope. Then she saw it. Shapes rising among cottonwoods, the promise of water. Her heart leapt, then sank as she approached. This was no thriving ranch, just half-collapsed buildings, abandoned and surrendering to the desert. But it was shelter. She staggered through the broken gate, calling out with the last of her voice. Silence answered. The main house stared back at her with empty windows, its door yawning open into darkness. But there was a well. When she dropped the bucket, The splash of water echoed from far below. Relief nearly buckled her knees. Yet as the sun slid toward afternoon, Elva understood something with painful precision. She was more alone than she had ever been. Whatever Thorn Harker had promised, whatever future she had imagined, had dissolved in this unforgiving land. She was an Eastern girl who had trusted too easily, and now she would pay for it. Sitting in the shade of the ruined porch, sipping carefully rationed water, Elva allowed herself one moment of absolute despair. Then, because she was Harlan Rook's daughter, and because she had not crossed 3,000 miles to surrender, she straightened her shoulders. She began to plan. The moon rose full and bright, painting silver shadows across the abandoned yard. She spent the afternoon searching the buildings, finding little of value, only rusted tools and moldy grain in the barn. She made her shelter in what had once been the kitchen, where the roof still held, and a stone fireplace guarded one side. With matches from her bag and dry cottonwood branches, she coaxed a small fire to life, keeping it low. Smoke could be dangerous in a country ruled by lawlessness. The revolver lay close as she crouched near the flames, ignoring the hollow ache in her stomach. The hard tack was long gone, eaten during her desperate march, and nothing edible remained in the ruins. It was the sound of horses that froze her blood. Not one mount passing by, but several, moving slowly, purposefully, like men who knew exactly where they were going. Elva snatched up the revolver, smothered the fire with a sweep of dirt, and pressed herself into the deepest corner of the kitchen. Through a split in the wall, she watched them enter the yard. 3 riders drifting into the moonlight with the loose confidence of men who hunted for sport. Even at a distance, she knew these were not men who spared lone women. Their voices carried in the still air, roughened by whiskey and cruelty. "Told you this place would do," one said as he swung down near the well. "Ain't seen tracks here in years." "Still say we should have pushed on to Tucson," another growled. "That mess in Prescott's gonna have every badge sniffing after us." "Let 'em sniff," a third answered. "We water the horses, rest a spell, then ride for the border come daylight." Elva's hand shook on the revolver. 3 men, all armed, all running hard from the law. She folded herself tighter into the shadows, whispering a prayer she knew the desert would not honor. The men decided to make camp in the yard, stacking wood and striking a fire far larger than the one she'd dared light. Soon the smell of meat filled the night. Her empty stomach twisted painfully at the scent. A bottle passed between them. Laughter grew louder, sloppier. "Hey, Russ Calder," one called. "Go check the house. Might be something useful left." Her heart thundered so hard she was certain it would give her away. Heavy boots crossed the yard. Spurs rang with each step. Elva raised the revolver. 1 shot, maybe. After that, there would be no mercy either way. The door creaked open. Moonlight cut a hard outline around a broad figure. The stink of sweat and cheap whiskey reached her before his face did. "Well now," he slurred, stepping inside as his eyes adjusted. "Look what we got." She pulled the trigger. The report exploded in the small room, but her trembling aim sent the bullet wide. Wood splintered near his head. He cursed and lunged, knocking the gun from her hand with brutal ease. "Boys," he shouted, "we got ourselves company, a woman." The other 2, Ash Crow and Vorn Pike, charged in. Rough hands seized her, dragging her out into the moonlight. They threw her down by the fire, and she stared up at 3 faces lit with cruel amusement. "Eastern girl?" Rusk said, rubbing his ear where the shot had passed close. "Fancy dress, soft hands. What are you doing out here all alone, sweetheart?" Elva tried to speak, but terror sealed her throat. Ash laughed and reached for her skirt. "Don't much matter what she's doing here. Matters what we do with her now." It happened too fast to understand at first. A shadow peeled itself from the darkness beyond the fire, moving with a silence that didn't fit its size. The man reaching for her made a wet, choking sound. His eyes went wide as he pitched forward, a knife buried between his shoulders. The other two scrabbled for their guns, shouting curses, but the shadow was already among them. In the firelight, Elva caught flashes, buckskin and cloth, long black hair flowing like water. The movements were smooth and merciless. One man fired once before a war club crushed his gun hand. His scream ended with a second blow. Rusk broke for the horses. He made it 3 steps. Less than a minute later, it was over. 3 men who had meant her harm lay motionless in the dust. Elva lifted her gaze to the figure standing over her, the most imposing presence she had ever seen. He stood tall and powerfully built, bronze skin and proud features marking him unmistakably as Apache. His dark eyes held hers with a steady intensity that left her feeling laid bare. She waited for death, too exhausted and stunned to flee, but the warrior did not advance. He walked to where her revolver lay, picked it up, and held it out to her. Grip first. Elva's hand trembled as she accepted it. The Apache stepped back, granting her space. She rose slowly to her feet. They faced each other in the firelight, separated by 10 paces, and centuries of blood and history. His voice, when he spoke, was low and calm. "My name is Cohen." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. At last, the warrior moved. He worked with calm precision, collecting the fallen men's weapons, then dragging the bodies away from the fire, one by one. Elva Rook watched in silence, her mind too numb to fully grasp what had just happened. When he returned after the last body was gone, he stopped a short distance from her. In the firelight, she caught something new in his dark eyes, something that might have been concern. He spoke then, his voice deep, steady, and unexpectedly gentle. His English was rough with accent, but clear. "Do not be afraid. You are safe here." The words shattered her. Everything she had been holding back, the fear, the hunger, the endless exhaustion, collapsed at once. Elva sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. She barely noticed the Apache moving around the camp, careful never to come too close, allowing her the dignity of her grief. When the tears finally eased, she saw that he had rebuilt the fire smaller, safer. A small pot simmered over the flames, its contents sending up a warm, unfamiliar scent. Her stomach clenched painfully, reminding her she had not eaten since the day before. He gestured to a spot across from him. An invitation. Elva hesitated. A lifetime of warnings warred with what she had witnessed with her own eyes. This man had saved her from a brutal fate, returned her weapon, and spoken to her with kindness. Slowly, cautiously, she sat where he indicated. He handed her a tin cup filled with stew. Rabbit, she guessed, seasoned with wild herbs she did not recognize. It was the finest thing she had ever tasted. They ate in silence. He kept his distance, every movement deliberate and non-threatening, as if she were a frightened animal he did not wish to spook. When the meal was finished, he spoke again. "You should not be here. This place." He gestured toward the ruined ranch. "It brings only death." "I was left at the stage station," Elva said, her voice raw. "I was supposed to meet someone." The rest of the truth tangled in her throat. He nodded, unsurprised. "The station has been closed many winters. The driver knew this." Anger flared through her fatigue. She had been abandoned, deliberately. Had Thorn Harker ever existed at all? Or had the letters been nothing but a lie? The warrior rose to his feet. Elva tensed. but he only walked to the horses the dead men had left behind. He chose the strongest among them, a sturdy paint mare, and led it back to her. "You cannot stay here," he said. "Others will come. They will look for these men." "Then where do I go?" The desperation in her voice surprised her. "I have nowhere. I don't even know where I am." He studied her for a long moment. She saw something shift behind his eyes, a choice being made. "My camp is 1 day's ride into the mountains," he said at last. "You will be safe there, until you decide your path." Everything she had been taught told her to refuse, to flee from him as she would any Apache. But what choice did she have? Wait here for more outlaws? Walk back toward a station abandoned for years? Die alone in the desert? "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why help me?" Something like a shadow of a smile touched his mouth. "Because someone should have, long ago." He turned to his own horse, a powerful black stallion, and began preparing to ride. "Gather what you need. We leave before the moon sets." Elva looked around at the blood-stained ground, at the broken buildings, at the death that had claimed this place. Then she looked at the man who had come out of the darkness to save her. She thought of all the stories she had been told, all the fear, all the lies. "I'll need my trunk," she said, "from the house." He nodded and helped her retrieve the few belongings she had left. As she mounted the paint mare, awkward, unsteady, having only ever ridden side saddle, she realized she did not even know the name of the man who had saved her life. There would be time for that later. For now, it was enough that someone had finally told her she was safe. And despite everything logic and society warned her against, Elva Rook believed him. They rode into the desert night, leaving the shattered ranch and its shallow graves behind, turning toward mountains that rose like sleeping giants beneath the stars. No words passed between them. Cohen rode ahead, guiding them along trails Elva Rook could not see, paths his horse followed without doubt or hesitation. The flat desert slowly surrendered to rocky foothills, then to slopes thick with pine climbing toward peaks etched faintly against the sky. The air cooled as they climbed, carrying the sharp scent of resin and sage, a clean contrast to the bitter alkali dust she had left behind. Elva gripped the saddle horn, her body aching from riding astride, every muscle protesting the unfamiliar strain. More than once, she nearly asked to stop, but pride sealed her mouth. She had already broken down once in front of this man who moved through darkness as if it were full daylight. When dawn finally crept across the eastern sky in streaks of rose and gold, they topped a ridge, and Elva caught her breath. Below them lay a hidden valley, cradled by sheer cliffs on 3 sides. A narrow stream cut through its center like a ribbon of silver. Cottonwoods and willows clustered along the water, and beneath an overhanging rock face stood a dwelling so carefully concealed it vanished into the stone. Cohen reined in his horse. "My home," he said simply. After a pause, he added, "You may call me Cohen." She nodded, then hesitated. "The name Samuel?" she asked quietly, recalling the word he had spoken earlier. A hard, humorless curve touched his mouth. "A name the mission school gave me," he said. "Not my true one. That is not for outsider tongues." He urged his horse forward and led the way down the narrow trail. As they approached, Elva saw the place was no temporary shelter. Stone walls had been shaped into the natural cave, forming solid rooms meant to last, cool in summer, warm in winter. Wooden additions extended the space, and a small corral nearby held several horses grazing on the valley's sweet grass. Cohen helped her dismount, her legs nearly folded beneath her, and he steadied her with hands that were powerful, yet careful. The moment she stood on her own, he stepped back, restoring the distance he had kept since the beginning. "Rest," he said, gesturing toward the dwelling. "I will tend the horses." Inside, Elva stopped short. The space overturned everything she had ever been taught to expect. The floors were covered with finely woven rugs. Shelves held Apache baskets and pottery beside books, real books, in English and Spanish. A rifle rested in one corner. Tools hung neatly along the walls. It was the home of someone caught between worlds. Exhaustion overtook her. She collapsed onto a bed layered with pine boughs and soft fur, too weary to think of manners or fear. When she woke, the sun stood high, and the smell of cooking drew her outside. Cohen crouched by a small fire, shaping flatbread on a heated stone while a pot of something savory simmered nearby. "You slept long," he said, without reproach. "Good. You needed it." Elva sat across from him, painfully aware of herself. Her traveling dress was torn and stained beyond saving. Her hair had slipped completely free of its pins. Yet his eyes held no judgment, only a quiet, assessing calm. "The men who attacked you," he said, handing her a plate. "They were Rusk Calder's crew, Ash Crow and Vorn Pike among them. They robbed a bank in Prescott, killed 2 men. The law will hunt them, but not here." "No one comes here?" she asked between bites of food that tasted far better than it should have. "I watch. I listen," he replied. "It is how I survive." He paused, choosing his words. "I lived with my people until the soldiers came. Then the mission school. They tried to make me white. I escaped, but I cannot return. My band sees me as changed. Your people see only Apache." He lifted one shoulder in a small, resigned shrug. "So I belong to neither." Elva understood that loneliness all too well. "I'm sorry," she said softly. His gaze sharpened. "Do not pity me. I chose this path." He rose to his feet. "There are things you must learn if you stay here. The desert does not forgive ignorance." The days that followed settled into a rhythm Elva would later remember as some of the strangest and quietest of her life. Cohen taught her with a patience she had never expected. How to find water by watching birds, which plants would nourish and which would poison. How to read the coming weather in the slow movement of clouds across the peaks, and slowly, without her quite realizing when it began, survival replaced fear. He taught her how to tend the horses properly, how to salt and smoke meat so it would keep, how to bank a fire so its embers survived the night. He was exacting, but never cruel. When Elva struggled with a task, Cohen simply showed her again, without irritation, changing his approach until it made sense to her hands and eyes. Elva worked harder than she ever had back in Philadelphia. She pushed herself, determined not to be another fragile Eastern woman who couldn't survive without help. In the evenings, they sat near the fire. Cohen repaired tack, shaped arrow shafts, cleaned and checked his weapons. Elva mended her torn clothing from supplies in her trunk, or practiced the skills he'd taught her. Sometimes he spoke of the land itself, teaching her to see the desert not as an enemy, but as a stern teacher that rewarded respect. "Your people see emptiness," he said one night, gesturing toward the wide sweep of land beyond the valley walls. "My people see abundance. Every plant, every animal, every stone has purpose. The desert provides, if you know how to ask." "Is that what you're doing?" Elva asked. "Teaching me how to ask?" That near smile touched his mouth again. "Perhaps, or perhaps I am only keeping you alive until you choose your path." She thought about that constantly. Where could she go? Returning east was impossible. Every dollar she had was spent. A frontier town offered nothing but suspicion and danger to a woman alone, with no protection and a tarnished name. Each day, the thought of leaving this strange refuge felt less bearable. One afternoon, while Cohen hunted, Elva explored the dwelling more carefully. In a small alcove she hadn't noticed before, she found traces of another life. A woman's dress in Apache style, a silver comb, a tiny pair of moccasins that had never touched the ground. She was holding the small shoes when Cohen returned. He stopped in the doorway. His face remained calm, but pain flickered in his eyes before he mastered it. "My wife," he said quietly, "and the child who never breathed, 3 winters ago." Elva placed the moccasins back where she'd found them. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "No," he said firmly, without anger. "You have the right to know who shares shelter with you." He set down the rabbit he'd brought and stood before the alcove, not touching anything, just looking. She was Mexican, taken as a child, raised Apache. The reservation police came for her, said she must be returned to her true people. She was with child. She could not run far. He stopped. The silence spoke louder than words. Tears burned Elva's eyes. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm. He froze, looking down at her pale hand against his weathered skin. It was the first time she had touched him of her own will, and they both felt the weight of it. "The world is cruel to those who don't fit its patterns," Elva said softly. He covered her hand briefly, the touch gentle despite the rough calluses earned by years of survival. "Yes," he said, "but sometimes it offers unexpected gifts." He stepped away, the moment passing, but not disappearing. That night, a sudden storm swept through the valley. They sat closer to the fire than usual as rain hammered the roof and lightning split the cliffs with white light. Elva told him about Philadelphia, about her father's death, and the losses that had pushed her west. She spoke of the letters from Thorne Harker, the promises of a new life, and the growing certainty that it had all been a lie. "Some men collect wives by mail," Cohen said when she finished. "Promise marriage, take the money, then vanish." "Or worse," he added, his jaw tightening. "They sell the women to brothels and mining camps." Elva shuddered, understanding how close she had come to something far worse than abandonment. "Why save me?" she asked. "You risked everything, killing those men." He was silent so long she thought he would not answer. When he did, his voice seemed far away. "The first winter after my wife died, I wished to follow her," he said. "But the spirit sent a vision, a white woman with hair like the sunset, lost, afraid, needing protection. I waited," he continued, "watched the roads, knowing you would come." Elva's breath caught. She wanted to dismiss it as belief or myth, but sitting in this hidden valley, saved at the exact moment she should have died, she found herself believing him. The storm passed, leaving the air clean and sharp with the scent of wet sage. And the woman Elva had been in Philadelphia felt like someone she had left behind forever. They settled for the night in separate spaces. Cohen remained in the main room, while Elva lay in the smaller chamber he had given her. But as Elva rested on her bed of furs, listening to water drip steadily from the eaves and the distant cry of an owl echo through the valley, she knew something essential had shifted inside her. What she felt for Cohen was no longer just gratitude. It was deepening into something else, something that unsettled her with its strength. She remembered all the warnings she had grown up hearing about the Apache, that they were cruel, savage, lacking human tenderness. Yet this man had shown her more respect and restraint than any so-called civilized man she had met on her journey west. He had saved her life, given her shelter, taught her how to live in a land that had nearly killed her, and he had never once demanded anything in return. As sleep finally pulled her under, Elva wondered if the desert had brought her here not to meet Thorn Harker, but to find something entirely different. A connection that defied everything she had been taught about the world and about where she belonged in it. The weeks slipped by in a rhythm Elva had never known back east. She rose with the sun, worked until the light faded, and slept when darkness claimed the valley. Her hands, once pale and soft, grew bronzed and calloused. The fine dresses she had brought were pushed aside, replaced with practical clothing. A simple skirt she had sewn from fabric in her trunk, loose blouses that allowed freedom of movement, and moccasins Cohen had taught her to make from deer hide. She learned to grind corn with a metate, the heavy stone roller awkward at first until her arms found the rhythm. Cohen showed her how to harvest prickly pear fruit without being pierced by its spines, how to prepare tough yucca fibers for weaving, how to read the stories animals left behind in dust and sand. Each skill mastered felt like a quiet victory over the land that had once seemed determined to claim her. One morning, while washing clothes in the stream, Elva caught her reflection in a still pool and barely recognized herself. The delicate Philadelphia woman was gone. In her place stood someone leaner, stronger, sun-touched and steady-eyed. She looked, she realized with a start, like she belonged here. Cohen noticed the change as well, though he rarely spoke of it. Sometimes she caught him watching her, his expression unreadable, caught somewhere between approval and something deeper he seemed determined not to reveal. Their days were filled with work, but the evenings brought a different kind of closeness. Cohen discovered the small stack of books in her trunk, a Bible, a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets, and an agricultural guide she had hoped might help her build a future. To her surprise, he asked her to read aloud. The mission school had taught him letters, he explained, but there were few books, and none that spoke of beauty. So Elva read by firelight while he worked with his hands, his dark eyes distant as he absorbed the words. He especially loved the sonnets, asking her to repeat certain lines, tasting them slowly. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, he recited one night, weeks into their routine, I, all alone, beweep my outcast state. Your Shakespeare, he said quietly, understood what it means to stand outside. Yes, Elva replied softly. I think he did. The exchange flowed both ways. Cohen began teaching her words in Apache. First, the practical ones: water, fire, horse, stone. Then, gradually, he shared more difficult ideas, concepts without true English equivalents, ways of understanding the world that made Elva realize how narrow her own vision had once been. Your people see time as a straight path, he told her one night, as they watched the stars turn overhead. The past behind, the future ahead. My people know time as a circle. All things return, he continued, seasons, stars, spirits of those who came before. Is that why you were waiting for me? Elva asked quietly. Because you knew I would come? He was silent for a long moment. Perhaps, he said at last. Or perhaps I tell myself stories so sorrow does not swallow me. He pointed toward a star she didn't recognize. That one does not wander. All others turn around it through the night. It stays, he said. Like truth. Elva studied the unmoving star. Then the man beside her. What truth does it hold? She asked. That some things are meant to be, Cohen answered, his gaze steady. No matter what the world says is impossible. Their eyes met, and neither of them looked away, and Elva felt that now familiar flutter tighten in her chest. She broke eye contact first, unsettled by how powerful the feeling had become. It was foolishness, pure madness. She was a white woman, raised to fear and mistrust the Apache above all others. Cohen was everything her world had warned her against. And yet the moment of crisis came on a day when he had ridden out to trade with a Mexican family 2 valleys away. People who, like him, lived along the edges of society and asked few questions. Elva was tending the small plot where corn and squash pushed up through the soil when she heard horses. Her heart slammed against her ribs as instinct screamed danger. Cohen always came openly, calling out so she would never be startled. These riders approached quietly, deliberately. She seized the rifle he had taught her to use and moved behind the low stone wall of the dwelling. 3 men rode into view, white men in dust-stained range clothes, their faces hard and alert. One wore a badge that flashed in the afternoon sun. Elva's mouth went dry. Lawmen. Searching for Burke's killers, perhaps, or simply sweeping the territory. If they found her here, living with an Apache, explanations might not matter. "Hello, the camp," the man with the badge called out. "Anyone here?" Elva stayed silent, willing them to leave. But one of the men dismounted and crouched, reading the ground with a tracker's eye. "Fresh sign," he said. "Woman's shoes and moccasins. Someone's living here." They spread out, hands drifting toward their guns. Elva knew she had seconds. If she hid and they found her, it would look like guilt. She stepped into view, rifle raised but not aimed. "That's far enough, gentlemen." They froze, startled. The man with the badge lifted his hands slightly. "Easy, miss. We're law, not trouble. Garen Holt, out of Tucson. We're hunting killers." "Burke's gang," he continued. 3 men. Dangerous." Elva kept her face still. "I haven't seen anyone like that." Holt studied her, her sun-darkened skin, her unfamiliar clothes, the stone dwelling behind her. His eyes narrowed. "You living here alone, miss?" "Is that a crime, Sheriff?" "No, ma'am. But it's unusual. Dangerous country for a woman on her own." His gaze sharpened. "Unless you're not alone. Those moccasin tracks are fresh." "You got an Apache buck hiding somewhere?" Elva's finger settled on the trigger. "I think you should leave now, Sheriff. You're looking for outlaws. There are none here." One of the other men spat. "Check her hands. She's got the look of a squaw woman living with one of them heathens." "I'd wager my horse on it." Holt lifted a hand, silencing him, but his eyes never left Elva. "What's your name, miss? Where you from?" "Elva Rook, Philadelphia." She met his stare. "And unless you have legal cause to detain me, I'm asking you again to leave." "Philadelphia," Holt repeated slowly. "Long way from home." "How does a lady from Philadelphia end up in Apache country?" Before she could answer, the sound she had been dreading reached them, the steady approach of a horse on the east trail. Cohen. Holt heard it too. His men stiffened, hands dropping to their weapons. "Nobody do anything foolish," Holt ordered, though Elva could see the tension coiled tight beneath his words. Cohen rode into view, took in the scene, and reined to a halt. Elva watched him read everything in an instant. The badge, the rifle in her hands, the threat hanging thick in the air. He dismounted slowly, palms open. "Sheriff," he said evenly, "is there trouble?" Holt's hand hovered near his pistol. "Apache, you're under arrest for kidnapping this white woman." "No." Elva stepped forward, lifting the rifle higher. "He saved my life. I'm here by choice." The standoff stretched taut, violence hovering like smoke. Then Cohen did something she hadn't expected. He smiled, not a mocking curl of the mouth, but a real smile, softening his usually guarded face. "Elva," he said gently, Lower the rifle. These men are doing their duty. We have nothing to hide. She hesitated, then lowered the rifle inch by inch. Cohen stepped forward, measured and calm, placing himself squarely between her and the lawman. "Sheriff Garen Holt," he said evenly, "you are tracking Burke's men. They are dead, 3 nights past the full moon, at the old Harker Ranch. You will find their graves east of the corrals." Holt's gaze sharpened. "You killed them?" "They attacked this woman," Cohen replied. "I stopped them. And then you brought her here," Holt said, the weight of accusation heavy in his tone. Elva moved past Cohen before he could stop her, anger pushing aside caution. "He saved me from animals." She set her hand on Cohen's arm, feeling him tense at the public touch. "Sheriff, I was abandoned at the stage station, left to die. This man showed me more Christian charity than any of my own people." Her voice steadied. "I stay because I choose to, because here I am safe and respected. Is that so hard to understand?" Holt looked between them, the way she stood protectively, the way they faced the world together despite it all. His weathered face showed the pull of 2 truths. Burke and his boys were worth 3,000 in bounty, he said at last. "Dead or alive, whoever put them down ought to collect." Cohen shook his head. "I want no blood money." "Then call it payment for protecting a citizen." Holt pulled a notebook, wrote quickly, tore out the page. "Take this to the bank in Tucson." He turned to Elva. "Ma'am, I have to ask. Are you here of your own free will? Say the word and we'll take you to town. No questions." Elva lifted her chin. "I've never been more certain. Sheriff, this is my home." Holt nodded, mounted his horse. "Apache," he said to Cohen, "you treat her right. Anyone says different answers to me." He tipped his hat to Elva. "If you need anything, you send word to Tucson." They watched the lawmen ride off, dust rising behind them. When they were gone, Elva realized she was shaking. Cohen's hands came to her shoulders, warm and steady. "That was dangerous." "I know," she said, "but I couldn't let them take you. I couldn't let them think—" "Think what?" His voice was gentle, searching. "That this is wrong. That we're wrong." The words spilled out. "I know what the world says. I know what I was taught. But these weeks with you, I've never felt more myself, more alive. Is that wrong? When I imagine leaving, my heart breaks." He held her gaze, hands still, breath controlled. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "The heart knows no color or customs, only truth." He stepped back, and the distance cut deeper than any blade. "But the world doesn't forgive those who cross its lines." "Then perhaps the world needs forgiving," Elva said fiercely. That night, the fire burned low as the weight of the law lingered between them. At last, Cohen spoke what they'd both avoided. "The sheriff is right. You could go to Tucson, start anew. The bounty would give you a proper beginning." Her chest tightened. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" "I want," he began, stopped, then tried again. "You safe, happy, free from judgment." "And if I say I'm happiest here, that I feel freer in this valley than I ever did in Philadelphia?" He met her eyes across the flames, hope and fear, longing and restraint all there at once. "Then," he said quietly, "I would say you are a foolish woman who does not yet understand what she risks." "Or perhaps," Elva said quietly, "I am a woman who finally knows what is worth risking everything for." The fire snapped and hissed between them, throwing restless shadows across the stone walls. Somewhere beyond the valley, a coyote lifted its voice to the moon, and the ancient stars turned overhead, unmoved by human ideas of race or propriety. Come morning, the same hard questions would still be waiting. But for now, they sat within the small circle of firelight. Two souls who had found one another against all reason in a land both cruel and breathtaking. The morning after the sheriff's visit broke clear and sharp, frost glazing the grass along the stream like scattered silver. Elva woke to an emptiness that felt wrong. Cohen was already gone. She found him by the horses, inspecting hooves with an intensity that had little to do with the task. "You're avoiding me," she said softly. He didn't deny it. "I am thinking about what the sheriff said," he replied. "About you leaving." "And what about what's best for me?" she asked. He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes stole her breath. "You don't understand. Yesterday was only the beginning. There will be more men, more questions, and one day words will not be enough." As if summoned by his warning, the morning's stillness shattered beneath the sound of many riders, far more than the day before. Elva's heart sank. These were not lawmen. Worse. A group of white settlers rode into the valley, men and women alike, faces set with righteous resolve. Cohen stepped instinctively in front of her. The leader, a stern man in clerical dress, raised a hand in greeting that carried no kindness. "I am Father Quill Mercer," he announced. "We've come from Willow Springs. Sheriff Garen Holt told us of the situation here." "And what situation would that be?" Elva demanded. Mercer's gaze swept over her, her plain clothing, her sun-darkened skin, her stance beside Cohen. His mouth tightened. "A white woman living in sin with a heathen savage," he declared. "An abomination before God and man." Murmurs rippled through the group. Several women whispered behind gloved hands, their eyes bright with scandal and judgment. "I live here in safety and dignity," Elva said firmly. "This man saved my life when my own people left me to die. Where is the sin in that?" "The sin," Mercer thundered, "is choosing to remain when Christian society offers redemption. These good people have come to return you to civilization, your rightful place among God's chosen." A woman stepped forward, her sympathy thin and rehearsed. "You poor dear. After such terror, it's natural to be confused. But we're here now. You can leave this nightmare behind." "Nightmare," Elva laughed, sharp and bitter. "The nightmare was trusting men who promised me a future and delivered me to bandits and death." She moved to stand beside Cohen. "This man has shown me more true Christianity than any of you." Anger stirred through the crowd. A voice from the back spat, "She's been corrupted. Living with that Apache's turned her into a squaw." Cohen had been silent until then. When he spoke, his voice carried calm authority. "The woman chooses her own path. You have no claim on her." Mercer flushed. "We have every claim. She is a Christian woman, one of our race. It is our duty to save her from degradation, by force if needed." Several men shifted, hands edging toward weapons. Sensing the moment tipping toward bloodshed, Elva stepped forward. "Wait." She faced Mercer squarely. "You speak of Christian duty. Then surely you will honor a Christian woman's right to speak for herself." After a tense pause, Mercer nodded stiffly. "Speak, quickly." Elva straightened, summoning every fragment of the dignity she'd carried from Philadelphia. "My name is Elva Rook, daughter of Harlan Rook of Philadelphia. I came west as a mail-order bride, promised to a rancher named Thorne Harker. But there was no Thorne Harker. Was there?" Uneasy shifting passed through the crowd. "It was a scheme to lure desperate women west. I was abandoned at a closed-stage station, left to die, or worse." She let the truth settle before continuing. "This Apache warrior found me under attack by outlaws. The Burke gang Sheriff Holt was hunting. He killed them to save me. He gave me shelter. He taught me how to live. He has never touched me without consent, never forced me to stay, never treated me with anything but respect and kindness." Her voice did not waver. "If this is your idea of sin, then I will wear it gladly." "But you remain," Father Quill Mercer pressed, "among heathens, apart from your own kind." "I remain," Elva answered steadily, "because here I am valued for my strength, not my lineage, because here I contribute real work, not decorative obedience. I remain because this man sees me as a human being, not property to be bartered through letters and lies." The woman who had spoken earlier sniffed sharply. "Fine words. They don't change what you've become. Look at you, dressed like a savage, skin dark as leather. No decent white man will have you now." The insult burned, but Elva lifted her chin. "Then I suppose it's fortunate I have no desire for decent white men." A wave of shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. Mercer raised his voice, sharp and commanding. "Enough. This is what comes of giving women too much freedom, too much choice. She's clearly been bewitched by this savage. We will take her by force if we must, for her own good." Everything happened at once. Men surged forward. Cohen moved instinctively to shield Elva, but they were too many. Rough hands seized her arms, dragging her toward the horses as she fought and screamed. She saw Cohen surrounded, struggling to reach her, blood already streaking his brow. "Cohen!" A gunshot cracked the air. The valley froze. At the entrance stood Sheriff Garen Holt, mounted, rifle raised skyward. Behind him were his deputies, and several Mexican traders Elva recognized from Cohen's stories. "That's enough," Holt said calmly. The crowd recoiled. Mercer sputtered, "Sheriff, we're doing God's work." "You're disturbing the peace," Holt replied, dismounting. He strode forward as the men parted. "Miss Elva Rook, are you being held against your will?" Hands released her. She ran straight to Cohen, pressing herself against him, seeing the blood from a cut above his eye. "No, Sheriff. These people are trying to force me to leave." Holt nodded. "That's what I thought." He turned to Mercer. "You and your folks are mounting up and riding out. Now." "You can't be serious," Mercer protested. "You'd leave a white woman here with this savage?" "I'll leave a grown woman to make her own decisions," Holt snapped. "And the next person who calls this man a savage answers to me." His voice hardened. "He served as an Army scout 3 years, earned commendations for bravery, paid taxes on this land through legitimate traders. Far as I'm concerned, he's got more right to be here than any of you claim jumpers and gossip mongers." The Mexican traders stepped forward, forming a quiet, protective ring. One older man spoke up, his English rough but sincere. "Cohen is good man, fair trade, keeps his word, helps when needed, better than many who call themselves Christian." Faced with the sheriff's authority and the unexpected support, the crowd began to fracture. But Mercer had one last arrow. "Mark my words," he declared, pointing at Elva. "You're choosing damnation. No decent society will ever accept you again. You'll be outcast. A warning told to wayward daughters." The truth of it landed heavily. To choose Cohen was to choose exile from everything she had known. Elva looked at the man beside her, bloodied, unbowed, still standing tall. Then she knew. "Then I choose to be an outcast," she said clearly. "I choose to be scorned by those who measure worth by skin instead of character. I choose love over approval, truth over propriety." She reached out and took Cohen's hand, openly, before them all. "This is my choice. I make it freely, knowing the cost, and I ask only to be left in peace to live it." Holt stepped forward, planting himself between them and the crowd. "You heard the lady. Time to go. And if I hear of anyone bothering these folks again, there will be consequences." Slowly, grudgingly, the settlers mounted up. Mercer hurled a final warning about the wages of sin before leading them away. The Mexican traders lingered a moment, offering quiet words of support in Spanish to Cohen, then departed as well. At last, only Holt remained. He looked at Elva and Cohen, still hand in hand, and shook his head. You know this won't be the end. There'll be others. Meaner than today. Maybe, Cohen said quietly. Holt sighed. For what it's worth, I think you're both fools. Then he turned his horse and rode out of the valley. Brave fools, then. Sheriff Garin Holt swung into his saddle. That offer about the bounty still stands. It could set you up far from here, someplace no one knows your story. This is our home, Elva said simply. Holt tipped his hat and rode out, leaving the valley to its quiet. Only then did the trembling catch up with her. Cohen drew her close, and she pressed her face to his chest, breathing in sage and leather. They were right, she whispered. I'll never be accepted anywhere again. His arms tightened. You are accepted here, always. She pulled back, seeing her own storm mirrored in his dark eyes, fear, resolve, and something deeper neither had dared to name. I meant what I said. I choose this. I choose you. Whatever comes. He cupped her face, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't noticed. The road ahead is hard, stones and thorns. You're not asking, Elva said. I'm choosing. There's a difference. They stood amid the aftermath, overturned jars, scattered tools, the wreckage of a peaceful morning. Then Cohen bent and kissed her. Their first kiss, gentle and fierce at once, sealed the choice that would shape both their lives. When they parted, the sun was high and the valley had settled back into its stillness. But everything had changed. The world now knew where Elva Rook had cast her lot. There would be no going back. As they worked together to set their home right, she felt the weight of that decision, and the wild, unexpected freedom it brought. The weeks that followed found a new rhythm, colored by the knowledge that their refuge had been seen. Cozen grew more watchful, vanishing for hours to scout the ridges. Elva threw herself into survival with renewed purpose, as if mastering every skill could prove the worth of her choice. Their bond shifted after that kiss. Where there had been careful distance, there were now small, certain touches. His hand at her waist, as he showed her how to string a bow, her fingers brushing his as they worked. In the evenings, she no longer sat across the fire, but beside him, close enough to feel his warmth against the desert chill. One night, as the first stars appeared above the canyon walls, Cohen spoke of what he'd long kept buried. My Apache name, he said quietly, is Nal Nish. It means he who works. My grandfather said I was meant to build, not destroy. Elva studied him in the firelight, seeing past the stern lines to the man who had built this haven with his own hands. Nal Nish, she repeated carefully. It suits you. He smiled, truly smiled, and his face changed. My wife never called me that. She said Samuel was the name of my new life, and she wanted to belong to it. His gaze drifted. I think she would have liked you. You have her strength, her way of seeing past what divides to what unites. Tell me about her, Elva said softly. He did, speaking of Kayla with a tenderness that ached, not with jealousy, but with compassion. Taken as a child after her family was killed, raised Apache, fierce and free. When the government demanded her return to civilization, he hid with her in this valley. We had 2 seasons of happiness, he said. Then the child came too early. Fever took them both. He gestured toward a small grove of pinyon pines, where the morning sun first touched the ground. I buried them there. Afterward, he told her, he sought only solitude, until the vision came. Elva took his hand, feeling the calluses and scars of a hard-lived life. "Do you still believe I'm the woman from your vision?" He turned their joined hands, studying the contrast of her pale skin against his bronze. "I believe the Spirit sends what we need when we are ready. I was turning to stone. You brought life back, to this place, to me." The next morning brought a different kind of visitor. Elva was grinding corn when she heard Cohen call out a greeting in Apache. 3 riders approached, Apache men in travel paint, feathers and beads bright against their horses' tack, moving with purpose into the valley. Elva's heart began to race, but Cohen showed no surprise. The leader of the riders, an older man with silver threaded through his long hair, dismounted and embraced Cohen like a brother. They spoke rapidly in Apache, words flowing too fast for Elva to follow. She caught her own name, a warning tone, fragments that sounded urgent. At last, Cohen turned to her. "This is Sahel, my mother's brother. He brings word from the reservation." Sahel studied Elva with dark, weighing eyes. When he spoke, his English was accented but clear. "So, you are the white woman who has chosen my nephew." Elva met his gaze without flinching. "I am." "The reservation agent speaks of you," Sahel continued. "The missionary speaks of you. They say Cohen has stolen a white woman. They say soldiers will come." He paused, his weathered face unreadable. "What do you say?" Elva drew a steady breath. "I say Cohen saved me when no one else would. I say I stay because my heart tells me this is where I belong. And I say those who speak against us know nothing of what is true between us." Sahel was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "You speak like an Apache woman," he said. "Direct, strong, no pretty lies." He turned back to Cohen, switching to their language. They spoke for several minutes more before the warriors prepared to leave. As they mounted, Sahel stepped closer to Elva. From his pouch he drew a necklace of turquoise and silver and placed it in her hands. "This was Cohen's mother's," he said softly. "She would want the woman of her son to wear it." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Hard times are coming. White soldiers grow restless. They look for one excuse to move against the reservation." His eyes flicked between them. "Cohen's choice gives them reason. Be ready." They watched the riders disappear into the hills. Elva fingered the cool stones of the necklace. What did he mean about the soldiers? Cohen's expression was grim. "The government searches for any excuse to break the treaty. Take more land. An Apache who corrupts a white woman could spark the violence they want." He rested his hands lightly on her shoulders. "Elva, perhaps it is time—" "No." She cut him off, firm and unyielding. "Don't tell me to leave for my own good. Don't make that choice for me." "Not for your good," he said quietly. "For my people. If my actions bring suffering to them." She saw the conflict tearing at him. Love for her set against duty to those who shared his blood. She reached up and touched his face. "Then we make sure your actions give them no excuse," she said. "We live quietly, peacefully. We give them no reason for violence." Even as she spoke, they both knew how fragile that hope was in a world that demanded rigid lines, red and white, savage and civilized. The test came sooner than either expected. 2 weeks after Sahel's visit, Elva woke to find Cohen preparing for war. His rifle was cleaned and loaded, extra ammunition laid out with care. His face was set, carved into lines of lethal focus. "Riders coming," he said. "From Tucson, many, moving with purpose." Elva dressed quickly, her own rifle in hand. Through the morning mist, she saw them. A full cavalry unit, perhaps 20 soldiers, advancing toward the valley in tight formation. Her mouth went dry. Cohen stepped forward into open ground, weapon lowered but ready. Elva stood beside him, chin high despite her pounding heart. The soldiers entered the valley with practiced efficiency, surrounding them in moments. Their commander dismounted, a young officer with sharp eyes and ambition written in every line of his posture. "I am Lieutenant Eliath Knox, 3rd Cavalry," he announced. "Are you the Apache known as Cohen?" "I am." Knox's gaze shifted to Elva, taking in her Apache dress, the turquoise necklace at her throat, the way she stood protectively beside Cohen. "And you are Miss Elva Rook, late of Philadelphia." "I am Elva Rook," she said evenly, emphasizing the present. The lieutenant withdrew a folded document from his jacket. "Miss Rook, I hold here a writ signed by Judge Maris Cade of Tucson." Elva felt the cold strike her blood the moment the words left the lieutenant's mouth. "Your family in Philadelphia has petitioned for your return," Eliath Knox said evenly. "They claim you're being held here against your will by hostile Indians." Elva stared at him. "My family?" Her voice sharpened. "I have no family left in Philadelphia." Knox's smile thinned. "Your cousin, Auric Vane, disagrees. He's expressed grave concern for your welfare. He's even offered to pay for your safe passage home." Understanding hit her like a blow. Auric, her father's nephew, the man who had inherited what little remained once the debts were settled. The same man who'd made it painfully clear that supporting her, or Brevin and Sella, was an inconvenience he resented. And now, suddenly, he was concerned. "I don't know what Auric hopes to gain," Elva said coldly, "but I'm here by choice. I'll sign any paper you want stating that." "I'm afraid it isn't that simple," Knox replied. He gestured sharply. His soldiers shifted, rifles lifting just enough to make the threat unmistakable. "The Apache will come with us for questioning," Knox continued, "and you, Miss Rook, will be escorted to Tucson for your own protection until this matter is resolved." "No." Elva stepped forward without thinking. "You have no cause to arrest him. He's done nothing wrong." Knox's expression hardened. "He's corrupted a white woman, turned her against her own kind. That's cause enough." The thin veil of civility dropped, revealing the ugliness beneath. "Sergeant," Knox barked, "take the Apache into custody." Everything erupted at once. Soldiers surged forward. Cohen lifted his rifle instinctively, and Elva threw herself between them, arms spread wide. "Stop!" she screamed. "I'll go with you. I'll go to Tucson." The valley went still. "I'll speak to Judge Maris Cade," she pressed on. "I'll sign whatever papers you need, but you leave Cohen alone." Knox hesitated, eyes flicking from her to the tense ring of armed men. Calculating. "Think, Lieutenant," Elva said urgently. "What looks better in your report? That you rescued a grateful white woman from captivity? Or that you started a firefight and killed the very woman you were sent to save?" For a moment, ambition and violence warred behind his eyes. At last, ambition won. "Stand down," Knox snapped. Reluctantly, the soldiers lowered their weapons. Knox turned back to Elva. "You come willingly to Tucson. In return, no arrest, no harassment of the Apache." He clearly hated the compromise, but he nodded once. "You have 1 hour to prepare." As the soldiers withdrew toward the mouth of the valley, Elva turned to Cohen. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes betrayed him. "No," he said quietly. "I won't let you." She silenced him with a kiss. Fierce, desperate, final. "Listen to me. I go to Tucson. I clear this. And I come back." "They won't let you return," he said. "You know this." "Then I'll find my own way back," she answered, gripping his hands. "Nal Nish, trust me. Trust us. What we have is stronger than their papers and their prejudice." The hour vanished too fast. Elva packed only what she could carry. essentials, and the documents from her trunk proving the lie that had sent her west as a mail-order bride. When she mounted the horse the soldiers brought, she looked back. Cohen stood alone beside their dwelling, proud and unmoving against the pale morning sky. "I'll come back," she called. "No matter what they do, no matter what lies they tell, I'll find my way back to you." He raised his hand in farewell. She saw his lips move in Apache. Whether prayer or promise, she couldn't know. Then Lieutenant Eliath Knox gave the order. The cavalry turned, carrying her away from the only true home she had ever known. As they rode through the narrow pass out of the valley, Elva closed her fingers around the turquoise necklace at her throat and made a promise of her own. Whatever waited for her in Tucson, whatever schemes Auric Vane had spun, whatever pressure society meant to bring down upon her, Elva would endure it. She had already chosen. Love over convention, truth over comfort. A man who saw her as she was over a world that saw only scandal. The desert unrolled before them, brutal and breathtaking, mirroring the fire she carried in her chest. Elva Rook, once of Philadelphia, now belonging nowhere and everywhere, rode toward an uncertain future, with one certainty anchoring her resolve. She would return to Cohen, or she would die trying. The journey to Tucson lasted 2 punishing days beneath relentless sun and choking dust. Lieutenant Eliath Knox kept her under constant watch, his manners polite enough to mask nothing. She was a prisoner in all but name, and they both understood it. Tucson rose from the heat in the late afternoon, a sprawl of adobe walls and wooden fronts pretending at civilization. Knox did not take her to a courthouse or barracks. Instead, he delivered her to a 2-story house on the respectable side of town, where a familiar figure waited on the porch. Auric Vane had grown broader since she'd last seen him. Prosperity clung to him like a scent, one that clearly hadn't come from caring for orphaned cousins. He descended the steps with practiced concern stretched across his face. "Elva, my dear cousin, thank God you're safe." He reached for her. She stepped back. His arms fell awkwardly, his smile never wavering as his eyes hardened. "You've been through such an ordeal," he said smoothly. "Come inside. We'll get you properly dressed." "What are you doing here, Auric?" Elva demanded. "And don't pretend this is about family. When my father died, you made it very clear we were burdens you couldn't wait to shed." Knox intervened with measured calm. "Perhaps this discussion should continue indoors. Miss Rook has had a difficult journey." They ushered her into a parlor heavy with new money and bad taste. A woman Elva didn't recognize sat stiffly nearby. Auric's wife, no doubt, acquired alongside his fortune. "Leave us," Auric ordered. Knox hesitated, then withdrew. The moment the door closed, Auric's mask vanished. "You stupid, selfish girl," he snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" "Cost you?" Elva laughed bitterly. "I've cost you nothing. I've been living my own life, making my own choices." "Living with a savage," he snarled, slamming his hand against a side table. "The scandal has reached Philadelphia. Business partners whisper. Contracts have vanished. All because my cousin decided to play Indian squaw." Understanding hit her clean and sharp. "So this isn't about saving me. It's about saving your reputation." "It's about saving us," Auric hissed. "I've spent good money bringing you here, greasing the right palms." He leaned closer. "You'll appear before Judge Mariscade tomorrow. You'll declare you were held captive, traumatized, not responsible for your actions. Then you'll return east. I've arranged a position for you as a governess, far from the city, where your shame can fade." "And if I refuse?" Auric smiled, cold and practiced. "Then I'll have you declared mentally unfit. Prairie madness, they call it. The judge is very understanding, especially when properly compensated." Elva rose, fury burning through her. "I'll tell the judge the truth. That I came willingly, that Cohen saved my life, that you're trying to control me for your own gain. You think anyone will listen to a woman who's lived with an Apache? His wife said for the first time, her voice sharp with contempt. You're ruined. The only question is whether you accept Oryx's generosity or rot as a madwoman. That night, they locked Elva in an upstairs room, iron bars set into the windows, for her protection. She paced like a trapped animal, mind racing. She needed to reach Garen Holt, or the Mexican traders, anyone who might speak for Cohen. But how? The answer came with breakfast. A young Mexican woman entered quietly, eyes lowered. As she set the tray down, she whispered rapid Spanish. Jace Moreno sends greetings. He trades with Cohen. He says, be ready. Hope flared in Elva's chest. When? Elva whispered back. At the courthouse, the woman murmured. Soon. Be ready. She slipped away as quickly as she'd come, leaving Elva staring at the untouched food, appetite replaced by resolve. Cohen's allies hadn't forgotten. Later that morning they dressed her like a doll. An Eastern gown Oryx had procured. Proper, restrictive, meant to erase the woman she had become. Elva allowed it. But beneath the stiff fabric and borrowed respectability, her promise burned unbroken. The corset had been pulled brutally tight, her breath shortened by design. Her hair was twisted and pinned until a dull ache throbbed behind her eyes. They had tried to take the turquoise necklace as well, called it inappropriate. But Elva Rook fought with such fierce resolve that they finally relented. It now lay hidden beneath the high collar, warm against her skin. A quiet promise she refused to surrender. Judge Mariscade's courtroom was overflowing. Word had spread fast, the white woman taken by Indians, and every bench was packed with townsfolk hungry for spectacle. Elva spotted Eliath Knox in his pressed uniform, Father Quill Mercer wearing a mask of righteous concern, and a sea of faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. But she also saw Jace Moreno standing near the back, and Garen Holt leaning against the wall, arms crossed. Her chest eased, just a little. Judge Cade was thin, sharp-eyed, and impatient, studying Elva as though she were a nuisance to be disposed of quickly. Oryx Vane had chosen his ally well. Miss Rook, the judge began smoothly, you've endured a terrible ordeal, living among savages, subjected to who knows what indignities. But you are safe now. Simply tell the court how you were held against your will, and we can put this unfortunate episode behind us. Elva straightened, drawing on every scrap of strength she had left. Your Honor, I was never held against my will. I stayed with Cohen, the Apache who saved my life, by choice. I am here today against my will, dragged from my home by force. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Cade slammed his gavel. Miss Rook, you are clearly suffering lingering effects from your captivity. I understand perfectly, Elva replied, her voice steady and ringing. I understand my cousin wants to control me to protect his reputation. I understand this court has been paid to declare me unfit. And I understand none of you can accept that a white woman might choose an Apache man over your so-called civilization. Oryx sprang to his feet. You see? Delusional. Prairie madness. But Elva was not finished. If I am mad, then let me speak it. Cohen found me abandoned by white men who promised marriage and delivered me to bandits. He killed 3 attackers to save my life. He sheltered me, taught me how to survive, and treated me with more honor than any white man ever has. She faced the crowd. Yes, I chose to stay. Yes, I chose to learn his ways. Yes, I chose love over propriety. If that is madness, then I accept it gladly. Enough! Judge Cade pounded the gavel. This woman is clearly unfit to— The courtroom doors burst open. A group of Mexican traders entered, led by Jace Moreno. And behind them, tall, unbowed, dressed in a blend of Apache and Mexican garments, stood Cohen. Proud, defiant, unmistakable. "No," Auric shouted. "Arrest him! He violated—" "What order?" Garen Holt cut in, stepping forward. "I never served any such order. Man's free to stand where he pleases." Cohen's eyes found Elva across the room. The love in them steadied her knees. He spoke, his voice clear and carrying. "I am here to speak truth. This woman came to me broken by lies and betrayal from her own people. I offered shelter and respect. Nothing more. She chose to stay. She chose to learn. She chose to see spirit instead of skin. If that is a crime, punish me, not her." Jace Moreno stepped forward. "Your Honor, we are respected businessmen. We have traded with Cohen for years. He is honest. He keeps his word. We saw happiness there, not captivity." Others joined in, traders testifying to Cohen's character. Garen Holt confirmed Elva's account of abandonment. The courtroom dissolved into chaos as Judge Cade struggled to regain control. Then violence struck. Seeing his plans collapse, Auric Vane drew a hidden derringer and aimed it at Cohen. "You ruined everything, you savage." Time slowed. Elva saw the gun rise, saw Cohen's eyes widen, saw death rushing toward the man she loved. Without thinking, she lunged forward. The shot cracked. Pain tore through her shoulder as the bullet meant for Cohen found her instead. She fell, blood blooming across the pristine white dress. The courtroom exploded. Cohen caught her as she collapsed, anguish ripping across his face. Garen Holt had Auric pinned to the floor, the smoking gun kicked away. "Elva!" Cohen's voice broke as he held her, and in the chaos, with blood on the floor and truth laid bare, the world finally saw the cost of its lies. "Elva?" Cohen cradled her against his chest, his hand pressed hard over the wound. "No. No. Stay with me." Through the fog of pain, she looked up at him and managed the faintest smile. "Now we're even," she murmured. "You saved me. I saved you." "Do not speak," he pleaded in Apache, his voice breaking. "Save your strength." But Elva had one truth left to give. "I love you," she whispered, first in English, then haltingly in the Apache words he had taught her. "I choose you, always." The edges of her vision darkened. The last thing she saw was Cohen's face, tears cutting paths down his cheeks as he held her close, whispering prayers in 2 languages. The last sound she heard before the darkness closed in was Judge Maris Cade's shaken voice. "Get a doctor, and arrest Auric Vane for attempted murder." Then there was only blackness, and the fading warmth of Cohen's arms around her. Elva felt no fear. She had kept her promise. She had fought her way back to him, whether it ended in life or death. She had chosen love over fear, truth over lies, a life claimed by her own heart instead of one written by others. In the end, that was all anyone could do. Choose a path and walk it without flinching. Blood spread across the courtroom floor, red as a desert sunset, while Cohen held the woman who had chosen him above all else, murmuring Apache prayers for her spirit to stay, to fight, to return to him as she had sworn. Elva drifted in a gray space between worlds, aware of voices but unable to answer. Sometimes she heard Cohen speaking softly in Apache, his deep voice rough with grief. Other times it was English, the doctor's calm assessments, Garen Holt's steady encouragement, even Jace Moreno offering prayers in Spanish. "The bullet passed clean through," the doctor said at one point. "Missed the vital organs, but she lost a great deal of blood. It's in God's hands now." Time lost its meaning. She felt strong hands holding hers, heard whispered words of love in 2 languages, smelled sage smoke, something Cohen must have brought from their valley. Slowly, painfully. She clawed her way back. When Elva finally opened her eyes, sunlight streamed through unfamiliar windows. She lay in a clean bed, her shoulder thickly bandaged. And Cohen sat beside her, his face drawn with exhaustion and worry. "Water," she croaked. His eyes flew open. Relief and joy transformed him. "Elva." He helped her drink, his hands trembling. "You came back. You kept your promise." "Always," she whispered. Where are we?" "Jace Moreno's house," he said softly. "He and Inez Moreno have cared for you. It's been 5 days." 5 days lost to darkness. "Auric?" she asked. Cohen's expression hardened. "In jail, awaiting trial for attempted murder. He showed his true face before the whole town. Even Judge Cade could not deny it." Elva touched the bandage on her shoulder, remembering the instant of choice. No thought, no hesitation, only certainty. "I couldn't let him hurt you." "Foolish woman," Cohen said quietly, but his voice was thick with emotion. "Brave, foolish woman," Elva corrected. "One who nearly died for an Apache, for the man I love." He shook his head gently. "Apache, Mexican, white. Those are only words. You see who I am. A man who builds, not destroys. One who works." "You are Cohen," she said. "You saved me in every way a soul can be saved. You are who my heart chose." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers, a gesture she now knew was deeply intimate among his people. They stayed that way for a long moment, breathing the same air, alive and together against all odds. Over the following weeks, everything would change. But in that quiet room, nothing else mattered. Elva recovered beneath the careful hands of Inez Moreno, who treated her less like a patient and more like a beloved daughter. The Mexican community closed ranks around her, recognizing in her choice a reflection of their own lives. People who had learned to stand between worlds and survive there. Cohen rarely left her side, helping her sit, helping her walk, telling stories of his childhood to ease the long hours while her body knit itself whole again. The trial of Auric Vane became the scandal of the territory. With Elva alive to testify, with dozens of witnesses to the shooting, even the most expensive lawyers could not untangle him from his crime. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. His business interests collapsed without his guiding hand. Elva could not miss the bitter irony. By trying to save his reputation, he had destroyed it beyond repair. More surprising still, Judge Maris Cade, faced with public proof of corruption and an audience unwilling to look away, reversed his earlier position. In a courtroom packed wall to wall, he declared Elva fully competent and legally free to make her own decisions. The document he signed was witnessed by half the town. "People can surprise you," Garen Holt muttered afterward. "Though I reckon losing his biggest bribe helped clear the judge's thinking." As Elva grew stronger, she and Cohen faced a choice. They could return to the Hidden Valley, but it would never again be the refuge it once was. Too many eyes knew its location now. Or they could begin again somewhere new, somewhere their story had not already hardened into rumor. It was Jace Moreno who offered the path forward. "I have land in California," he said one evening. "Good land near the coast, far from this place. It needs people who know how to work, how to build, people who understand Mexicans and Anglos and Indians alike." Cohen and Elva exchanged a glance. California. A clean horizon. A place where mixed families were not unheard of, where the scars of the Apache Wars cut less deeply. "We'll think on it," Cohen said, but Elva saw the hope flicker in his eyes. The morning they chose their future, Elva was finally strong enough to ride. Cohen lifted her onto the paint mare he had somehow reclaimed from their valley, and together they rode to a hill overlooking Tucson as the sky began to pale. "There is something I must ask," Cohen said as dawn crept in. "In my people's way, when a man and a woman choose each other, they speak their promises to the rising sun. But you are not Apache, and I am not fully what I once was either. So I ask you this." He turned to her. "Will you marry me in whatever way makes it true for both our hearts?" Elva smiled through tears. "Yes, in your way, in my way, in any way that tells the world we belong to each other." In the end, they married 3 ways. At dawn, in a quiet Apache ceremony, with Jace and Inez Moreno standing witness. Then by a gentle Catholic priest who believed God's love was wider than human prejudice. And finally before a justice of the peace, whose signature would shield them within the laws of the white world. Their wedding gift from the Mexican trading community was a wagon packed with supplies for California, and a purse heavy with silver. "For friends who taught us that love has no borders," Jace said, embracing them both. Garen Holt appeared as they prepared to depart, carrying a small wooden box. "That bounty money from Ash Crow and Vorn Pike," he said gruffly. $3,000. I know Cohen didn't want blood money, but I figured justice put to better use is still justice." Even Father Quill Mercer came, looking uneasy but resolved. "I was wrong," he said simply. "Fear and prejudice blinded me to what stood before me, 2 people who truly care for one another. I pray God forgives my hardness of heart." He placed a Bible in Elva's hands. "For your new home. May you find the peace that escaped you here." As their wagon rolled west, Elva looked back once at Tucson, then forward to the unknown line where earth met sky. She sat beside Cohen on the bench, her hand resting in his, the turquoise necklace warm against her throat. They had survived abandonment and violence. They had chosen each other in a world determined to pull them apart. And together, they rode toward a future they would build with their own hands. Prejudice had tried to tear them apart. Even a bullet meant to end what the world refused to understand. Still, they chose each other over the false safety of separate lives. "Are you afraid?" Cohen asked, as the wagon rolled away from the familiar desert into lands neither of them knew. Elva Rook thought of all they had endured. The lies, the violence, the moment he had found her alone and broken, whispering words that changed the course of her life. "Don't be afraid. You're safe here." "No," she said at last, leaning into his shoulder. "I'm not afraid. I'm with you. And that's all the safety I need." The wagon creaked westward toward California, carrying them into a future they would shape with their own hands. Behind them, the desert stretched wide and merciless, filled with memories both bitter and tender. Ahead lay uncertainty, bright, dangerous, and full of promise. They were 2 people who were never meant to meet, never meant to love, never meant to survive what they had survived. Yet the heart obeys laws stronger than any written statute, and love answers to a justice no court can deliver. Elva Rook and Cohen, once called Samuel, once called Nal Nish, had written their own story in defiance of everything the world expected. Now they would live it, one sunrise at a time. As the sun climbed higher, washing the land in gold and rose, Elva began to hum a melody Cohen had taught her. An Apache song of journeys and returns, of finding home not in soil or walls, but in another person's heart. Cohen joined her, his voice steady and low. Their song drifted across the open land, a harmony born of difference and strengthened by choice. The road ahead was long, the trials unknown. But they faced it together, a settler's daughter and an Apache warrior, proof that love could take root even in the harshest ground. That understanding could span the deepest divides, and that sometimes the bravest act of all was reaching for someone's hand, and refusing to let go. Don't be afraid. You're safe here. The words that began their story echoed with every turn of the wheels, a promise renewed with each mile, each sunrise, each hardship faced side by side. No longer just reassurance, they had become a vow, their truth, their forever. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso Legal/Disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.